Well, good morning. This is May the 4th, 2021. We continue our study in the book of Ecclesiastes. And we're going to take a look at verse 1 of chapter 3, where the word time in those first 8 verses is mentioned numerous times. Pardon the pun. Well, let's take a look at the verse itself and pull it apart as we prepare to take a look at each one of these segments listed in chapter 3 of the book of Ecclesiastes. There is an appointed time for everything, and there is a time for every event under heaven. Now, we can blow by this verse. We can breeze through it and say, okay, yeah, there's a time for everything. Yeah, okay. But do we think about it in relationship to the events of the Bible? Do we think about it in relation to the events of our own life? So I want to do a little walkthrough with you on the phrase appointed time. Appointed time. The word or the phrase appointed time is used 40 times in the Bible. 40 times. That's a significant amount of time for this specific phrase, appointed time. And it is related to a host of events. And I want to just give you a short sampling this morning. First of all, in Genesis 18:14, is anything too difficult for the Lord? At the appointed time, I will return to you at this time next year, and Sarah will have a son. Now, hopefully you recognize the content that this is the angel of the Lord visiting Abraham and Sarah with reference to the promised child of Isaac. And the angel says, at the appointed time. Life is at the appointed time, at God's appointed time. In Exodus 13:10, therefore you shall keep this ordinance at its appointed time from year to year. That's referring to the consecration of the firstborn, the Passover that was supposed to be celebrated each year at a specific time. And if you read in Exodus and Leviticus, where it's mentioned a number of times, it gives you the exact day and the exact month. So there is an appointed time for worship. In 1 Samuel 13:8, now he waited for 7 days until the appointed time that Samuel had set, but Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattering from him. This is the first incident of 2 of Saul's direct disobedience. Samuel said, I will come to you before you go into battle, and I will give you the Lord's plan for victory. Now, it specifically says here, he waited 7 days, and that was, Samuel said, I'll be there in 7 days. He didn't say what time on the 7th day he would be there, but there was an appointed time. Saul did not wait for the appointed time for Samuel to come. He rushed ahead. And when you rush ahead of God's appointed time, there will be problems. In 2 Samuel 24, so the Lord sent a plague upon Israel from the morning until the appointed time, and 70,000 men of the people from Dan to Beersheba died. This is David's selection of 3 options for judgment because he numbered the people. But again, the emphasis of the appointed time in relationship to God's punishment. God's punishment doesn't go on and on and on. There is an appointed time for it to begin and for it to end. In Ezra 10:14, please let our leaders represent all the assembly and have all those in our cities who have married foreign wives come at appointed times, together with the elders and judges of each city, until the fierce anger of our God on account of this matter is turned away from us. This is the rebuilding of the temple that had been destroyed by the Babylonians. And they, during this time, had intermarried with foreign wives, and Ezra is trying to spiritually clean house. And so he set an appointed time to deal with the sin of the people because of God's anger directed towards them. And then in Psalm 75:2, God is speaking, when I select an appointed time, it is I who judge fairly. We seek to be just in our relationships of dealing with matters fairly, but God is the only one who judges fairly, impartially, because of his very nature of holiness. And there is always an appointed time when God's fairness will be implemented. And Daniel 8:19, where the word appointed time appears often, especially in chapter 7 through the end of the book, because of its prophetic nature, it's recorded here in chapter 8, verse 19, behold, I am coming to inform you of what will occur at the final period of the indignation, because it pertains to the appointed time of the end. He's referring to Jehovah's return, and that there is an appointed time, and there are events that will take place at their appointed time. And then Habakkuk 2:3, for the vision is yet for the appointed time. It hurries toward the goal, and it will not fail. Though it delays, wait for it, for it will certainly come, and it will not delay long. So here's Habakkuk wondering about the goodness of God, the holiness of God in light of all the corruption. And God tells him, there is an appointed time. It will take place. I'm not going to fail. It might delay, but it will come about. And then Mark 13:33, Jesus talking to his disciples, watch out, stay alert, for you do not know when the appointed time is, referring to his coming back. But the message for us today is we need to be aware of our surroundings. We need to be cognizant of the events that are touching our lives or touching other people's lives, and know when the appointed time is. And then finally, Acts chapter 1, verse 7, but he said to them, referring to, again, the disciples, wondering when he will come back and set up the kingdom, it is not for you to know periods of time or the appointed times which the Father has set by his own authority. So there are some things that are already determined in heaven. They are foreordained, and we are not privy to all of those particular details. However, based on Habakkuk, they will take place. If we read them in the Bible, they're going to take place. Time. Consider doing a concordance study on such phrases as the fullness of time and at the right time. There is valuable information on each one of those phrases from the New American Standard Bible. Or consider such major Bible events and ask yourself, how would that event have been altered if someone else was in charge of time? Events such as the release of Israel from Egypt after 430 years of captivity. Remember, Moses tried that. The 400 years of silence by God between the testaments. What about the timing of the birth of Christ? Could he have come during the Babylonian Empire, the Greek Empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, or the rapture, or events related to that? Tomorrow we'll pick up the first phrase, a time to give birth and a time to die. Seems pretty simple, doesn't it? But let's expand our thinking in reference to this and the Christian's response to both life and death, birth and death. Thank you so much for joining us. Lord willing, we'll see you tomorrow.